Chapter 197. Even Granny Zhao tactfully left. There was not a single person left in the yard and it was very quiet. Long Fei Yi was sitting there, currently choosing his golden needles. Han Yunqing was standing to the side, secretly looking at his face. She did not see wrong, he was indeed very calm. Yesterday's matter did not seem to have any effect on him. But, that was her first kiss. Then what about him? Yesterday's kiss was too sudden and too short. The inexperienced her could not tell if it was his first time or if he was skilled. In short, she only had one impression and that was that he was very domineering. Thinking about it, yesterday's scene unconsciously appeared in her mind. Han Yunqing's little face immediately turned red. At this time, Long Fei Yi suddenly looked up. His eyes deeply stared at her as if he had seen through something. Han Yunqing's embarrassed face almost burned. She quickly turned around and ran away in a panic. "Your Highness, please wait. This concubine will bring some tea over." Long Fei Yi's deep black eyes flashed with a trace of playfulness that no one could see through. He did not call out to her and continued to pick out the golden needles on the stone table. Not long after, Han Yunqing really did bring over some tea and pastries. Now that she had time to adjust her mind, she had recovered quite well. At least she looked much more natural than before. "Your Highness, have some tea." She sat down in front of him and boldly looked into his eyes. Since this fellow was this calm, what was there for her to feel awkward about? "Long Fei Yi, yesterday was an accident. Next time, this princess will not be so easy to offend." Long Fei Yi calmly took the teacup and slowly drank a few mouthfuls. Han Yunqing also learned from him, leisurely drinking the tea. The two of them were very quiet. It was the end of spring and the pear blossoms in the yard fluttered down. Looking at this scene from afar, it was like a painting. The scenery was beautiful, the people were beautiful, and even the years were beautiful. However, whether the heart of the person in the painting was calm or not, only the two of them knew. Long Fei Yi had already sifted through the pile of concealed golden needles and picked out 5 that were suitable for Han Yunqing to learn. They were the plum blossom needle, needle, acupoint needle, array needle, and mouth needle. He picked up a plum blossom needle and began to teach. The plum blossom needles were 5-edged and slightly larger than the medical needles in Han Yunqing's hands. Han Yunqing had previously thought that such a golden needle would be very powerful. But who would have thought that the plum blossom needle was actually the lowest level, and also the easiest to learn golden needle concealed weapon. It was usually hidden in a pocket, and when it was needed, one could grab a handful and throw it at the enemy. One golden needle had 5 sharp blades, and a large number of them would have countless sharp blades. When the enemy was caught off guard, the hit rate was still very high. There's another way to use it. When you're escaping, throw it on the ground and it can stab the enemy's foot, giving you time to escape. When Long Fei Yi said this, he handed a plum blossom needle to Han Yunqing and added coldly, "Of course, this prince thinks that you don't need to use this ability. When it's time to escape, one must escape." Han Yunqing muttered in her heart, but on the surface, she nodded seriously, "Amen, I understand." It seemed that she didn't need to practice the plum blossom needle. Long Fei Yi took out 2 golden needle concealed weapons at the same time. The length and thickness were about the same as a normal medical needle, but one of them had 3 needle points at the end, and the other needle point was hooked. These 2 are called acupoint needle. As Long Fei Yi said this, he raised his eyebrows and looked at Han Yunqing, saying indifferently, "Guess how it's used." Acupoint needle. Han Yunqing picked up the acupoint needle and gestured. She didn't even need to think before answering, this is specially used to attack the vital acupoints. Since it was called acupoint needle, it must be used to attack acupoints. But it had to be said that the Tang sect's research on this kind of needle was really ruthless. A normal golden needle piercing an acupoint was much scarier than using a finger to attack an acupoint, much less this kind of needle. It was simply asking for death. It wasn't sure if Han Yunqing was smart or if Long Fei Ye's question was too simple, but in any case, he didn't praise her for being smart. He continued, this needle can be used in close range or long range. To use it in close range, you need to get close to the enemy and attack when they're unprepared. To use it in long range, it tests your eyesight and hand strength. Han Yunqing nodded seriously. She knew that eyesight and hand strength were the key to using concealed weapons. Long Fei Yi wasn't in a hurry to teach her these two abilities. He picked up the third type of golden needle concealed weapon. This needle was very small, only half the size of a normal medical needle. This is called a needle. Needle? Han Yunqing didn't understand. From what she knew, whenever a needle was mentioned, she would think of a clock. However, this needle wasn't a needle. Long Fei Yi silently hid the golden needle between his fingers. His large hand suddenly reached towards Han Yunqing's face. Before his hand could get close, the golden needle was exposed and almost hurt her face. Han Yunqing didn't expect this. When she was about to dodge, Long Fei Yi had already retracted his hand and asked rather patiently, "Do you understand?" Han Yunqing suddenly realized that the needle in needle referred to the fingers. She nodded as she hid the needle between her fingers. As expected of someone who held needles all year round, such a small trick wasn't difficult for her. Soon, her 10 fingers were full of needles. "Take this," she shouted sternly and stretched out both hands. In a moment, 8 needles surrounded Long Fei Ye's face. The needle tips were less than half a needle away from his cheek. That was close. One had to know that if Han Yunqing had used just a little more strength, or if Long Fei Yi had moved just a little, his face would have been done for. It was a habit that he had cultivated since he was young to never allow any danger to come near or anything that was out of his control. However, in that moment, if Han Yunqing wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as flipping her hand. In that instant, a murderous intent flashed across Long Fei Ye's eyes. Han Yunqing didn't notice Long Fei Ye's abnormality. She liked this kind of needle very much and retracted her hand with a chuckle. "This is fun. I'm good at it." As she spoke, she started to fiddle with the needle. She actually hid 4 to 5 golden needles in between her fingers without being exposed. She raised her hand to show Long Fei Yi and said cockily, "Not a single one hit. There's still a follow-up." What a surprise. Before Long Fei Yi could see clearly, Han Yunqing had already put down all the golden needles in between her fingers. She opened up her 5 fingers for Long Fei Yi to see and laughed mischievously. She then put down her palm and touched the stone table. Once again, she showed Long Fei Yi her 5 fingers were all closed. She smiled mysteriously at Long Fei Yi. Her clear eyes flashed and a golden needle immediately appeared in between each of her fingers. She blinked again and the second golden needle appeared. Just like that, like magic, 5 golden needles appeared in between each of her fingers. Moreover, some of the golden needles appeared from the palm of her hand while some appeared from the back. Her fair and delicate little hand seemed to have magic as it kept changing. That skillful appearance, those who didn't know would think that she was a hidden weapon expert. However, Long Fei Yi wasn't looking at her movements, but her eyes. That pair of eyes were lively and bright. Following her movements, they suddenly brightened and dimmed. It was as if they could speak and were very charming. Unknowingly, the killing intent in Long Fei Ye's eyes had long disappeared without a trace. Gradually, Han Yunqing felt that something was wrong with him. She stopped and blinked her eyes at him. "Your Highness," Long Fei Yi finally regained his senses. Finally, after last night, he couldn't remain calm and evaded. She casually took out the remaining 2 types of golden needle hidden weapons and introduced them simply. This is called a row of needles, also known as a shoe needle. It is placed at the tip of the shoe and is used to kick the opponent's vital points. This requires the leg to be strong. It would be even better if you have leg skills. This is called a mouth needle. As the name suggests, it is hidden in the mouth and is used to injure the opponent. This requires internal strength. Actually, the usage of the 5 types of golden needle hidden weapons were very simple and could be understood with a little explanation. However, it was far from simple to use. Especially when facing an enemy, if it was used well and accurately, it definitely wasn't something that could be grasped in a short period of time. Han Yunqing, who was anxious to learn, missed the moment when this big iceberg dodged. She anxiously said, "Your Highness, teach me internal strength. Also, teach me hand strength and eyesight." After Long Fei Yi had introduced it once, she didn't even need to think much before she knew how to apply the poison on these golden needle hidden weapons and what kind of poison to apply. In her previous life, she had never thought of becoming a poisoner. However, the situation forced her to do so, and there were people who saw her as a threat. Since that was the case, she might as well make this threat a reality. Not only would she be a poison doctor, relieving the sick, but she would also be a poisoner, protecting herself, punishing evil and eliminating traitors. Han Yunqing was in a hurry, but unfortunately, Long Fei Yi poured a basin of cold water on her. He stood up and said indifferently, "First, learn how to use it thoroughly. As for the rest, there's no hurry." His usual style was that his patience was limited. He wanted to leave after speaking, but Han Yunqing didn't let him go this time. She quickly chased in front of him to block his way and smiled obsequiously, "Your Highness, since you're here today, you should teach me all together. I've been playing with golden needles since I was young, so I can learn these needle techniques quickly." Although Long Fei Yi didn't reply, he didn't move either. Seeing this, Han Yunqing thought that there was hope and quickly said, "Your Highness, Qinxie will understand with just a hint. I guarantee that I won't take up too much of your time." Long Fei Yi still said the same 2 words, "There's no hurry." "Your Highness," actually, unexpectedly, before Han Yunqing could finish speaking, Long Fei Yi interrupted her and said, "There's no hurry. Wait for Tang Li to come and let him teach you." When these words came out, Han Yunqing was dumbfounded. She couldn't say the words that were on the tip of her tongue. Long Fei Yi promised to teach her how to use concealed weapons, but he didn't promise how to teach her or to what extent. Thus, he simply explained a few things to her as a way of fulfilling his promise. She didn't have anything to say. This stingy guy. He clearly remembered what happened at the city gate last time. Wait for Tang Li to come and teach her. When would Tang Li come? Would he really come? Han Yunqing chuckled. Meanwhile, Long Fei Yi had already turned around. There was a faint smile on his usually cold lips, as if he was secretly laughing. "Han Yunqing, there are many people who beg this prince, but you're the only one who's missing." Han Yunqing looked at Long Fei Yi's back and didn't chase after him. She narrowed her eyes. "Humph, want me to beg him? No way. Long Fei Yi, you're the one who introduced me to concealed weapons. Don't come begging me to learn in the end." Han Yunqing steeled her heart. That day, she began to poison a bunch of golden needles and concealed weapons. She couldn't help but think of Gu. Was the poison on the back of that guy's hand cured? Was his injury healed? Would he still dare to barge in the next time? She heard from Zhao Mama that since last night, not only Hibiscus Courtyard, but the guards in the entire estate had doubled. It was said that all the guards were transferred from the solitary courtyard. At this time, Gu wasn't anywhere else. He was at the Han residence. He sat on the roof of Han Yunqing's empty room. His handsome face was calm as he unwrapped the bandages on the back of his hand. Fortunately, he escaped quickly yesterday. Otherwise, his hand would have been ruined by Han Yunqing. Flesh-corroding powder. What was this girl's heart made of? How could she be so ruthless? Chapter 198. Gu undid the bandages on the back of his hand and quickly saw that there were still traces of blood on them. The poison had long been cured, but there was a pellet-sized wound on the back of his hand. Although it had scabbed over, it was a full layer lower than the skin around it, showing how deep the wound was. This was the result of the stone that Long Fei Yi had shot at him. If he hadn't been so shocked by the Tang clan's assassination weapons that he'd neglected his surroundings, he would have sensed Long Fei Ye's arrival long ago. His hand wouldn't have been injured so badly. He'd only used some medicine to make the wound scab over, saving him the trouble of bandaging it up. But it would take some time for him to fully recover. During this time, he wouldn't be able to use much strength on his hand. Of course, Gu didn't care about the wound. He was more concerned about the hidden weapons and needles on Han Yunqing's table. He couldn't be wrong. The needles on the stone table were all very exquisite. Whether in terms of craftsmanship or material, they definitely came from the Tang clan and weren't imitations made by commoners. The current Tang sect was famous for their hidden weapons. However, the Tang sect's poison techniques were also top-notch, and they were on par with hidden weapons. Unfortunately, their poison techniques had declined, and gradually, the number of people who knew about them became fewer and fewer. Unfortunately, he knew about them. Where did Poison Lass get these things from? Or was she somehow related to the Tang clan? Could it be that her mysterious poison skills came from the Tang clan? But judging from the way she treated poisons and her style, it didn't seem like it. Her mother was Lady Tianxin, but was her father really Han Kongan? Could this Poison Lass be the person he'd been searching for all this time? Gu wanted nothing more than to go back to the Duke of Qin's estate and ask Han Yunqing face to face. Unfortunately, he couldn't act rashly right now. Long Fei's movements were very fast. Last night, the Duke of Qin's estate guards had become even stricter. Most abominable of all, that fellow was even investigating all of Tianning's properties to find out his background. Gu did not care about the injury on the back of his hand, but it did not mean that he did not hold a grudge. As he waved his hand, he narrowed his bewitching eyes and muttered, "Long Fei Yi, there will be a day when this young master will settle old and new grudges with you." Han Yunqing had long forgotten the question Gu had asked before he was plotted against by Long Fei Yi. For the next few days, she didn't leave the Duke of Qin's manor. She was busy applying different poisons to the concealed weapons. At the same time, she diligently practiced the various methods of drawing out needles. She was already familiar with them, so after a few days of practice, she became very adept. Moreover, she also played many new tricks outside of the methods that Long Fei Yi had taught her. It was a pity that she didn't have enough strength. She couldn't use them from a long distance, and she could only use some of her golden needles at close range. She also had to be faster than her opponent. She'd never come across such things before, but Han Yunqing was very interested. She even dragged a few guards over to practice, scaring them so much that they didn't dare to show themselves. Long Fei Yi had nothing to do these days. He stayed at home, but didn't come to Han Yunqing's place. He was in a good mood and actually agreed to Grand Concubine Yi's request. With a few words, he found an important position for Zhang Sun Che, Murong Wanru's current husband. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Appointments was a fourth-rank official. In the capital, where one could hit a few third-rank officials with a casual throw of a stone, a fourth-rank official was nothing. But this was the Ministry of Appointments, the head of the civil officials. The position of the assistant minister was second only to that of the Minister of State. He was in charge of all civil officials in the world, such as appointments, examinations, promotions, and promotions. With such a position, how could he be afraid of others looking down on him? Even the higher-ranked officials had to be polite and didn't dare to offend him. Naturally, the higher-ranked officials were appointed by the emperor himself. But who could guarantee that their relatives and friends would have a smooth career without asking the Ministry of Appointments for help? In short, the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Appointments wasn't just a fat job, but an extremely high status. Because of Murong Wanru's special status, no one dared to provoke her at Marquis Pingbei's estate. As a newlywed, Zhang Sun Che waited on her like a grandson. Now that her maternal family had found him such a good position, Murong Wanru's face looked very good. She came back personally to thank him, but Long Fei Yi didn't even want to see her. Han Yunqing had heard all of this from Zhao Mama's gossip. She thought, Murong Wanru's already married off, so what else can she do? If the Duke of Qin could find a position for Zhang Sun Che, she should be satisfied and quiet down. In any case, Han Yunqing gradually threw Murong Wanru to the back of her mind. While she pondered over her assassination weapons, she also pondered over the poison Long Fei Yi had given her. But she made no progress. Soon, it was the 15th. The 15th was the day Han Yunqing would be volunteering to treat patients at the Han family's South Clinic in the city. Sifang Clinic had released the news early, and people had been lining up at the South Clinic since last night. This was the most crucial step for Han Yunqing to revitalize the Han family clinic and re-establish the Han family's name. No matter how busy she was, she didn't dare to delay. She woke up early and specially changed into a set of simple and clean clothes, arriving at the South Clinic early in the morning. Who knew that the line was already very long? Han Yunqing peeked through the crack in the door and found that not only were there poor people in the line, there were also many well-dressed rich people. Although these people were only here for her sake, Han Yunqing believed that one day, they'd be willing to walk into the Han family's medical clinics as well. Just as Han Yunqing was making preparations, little suddenly popped out from under the counter. Sister! Han Yunqing jumped in fright. Little guy, when did you come? Little tilted his head and looked at her, blinking his large, adorable eyes. He asked very seriously, Sister, are you sure you can handle it? Han Yunqing was amused by little Er's adorable and serious expression. She pretended to be angry, narrowing her eyes as she approached and asked coldly, Han Yuni, are you looking down on me? Unexpectedly, little wasn't afraid and became even more serious. Sister, you're good at detoxification, not treating illnesses. What if someone wants to frame you and give you a difficult problem? The scene outside isn't small. Han Yunqing immediately became alert when she heard this. Of course, she knew that she was a poison doctor and wasn't an expert in treating illnesses. However, no one stipulated that the patients had to be cured of their illnesses for the free clinic. It was normal if they couldn't be cured. She could provide advice or recommend them to other doctors. However, little Er's words reminded Han Yunqing that if someone wanted to make a fuss about this matter, it wouldn't be good for her reputation. Just as Han Yunqing was falling silent, little tugged on her sleeve and said sneakily, Sister, look behind you. Han Yunqing was deep in thought when she inadvertently turned around. She saw a white-robed gentleman standing behind her. Piled stones like jade, pine trees like emerald green, his beauty was unparalleled in this world. Such a poem immediately popped into Han Yunqing's mind. This person was none other than the youngest head of the Imperial Physician Academy, the authority of Tianning country's medical community, Gu Beiyue. He smiled faintly, a very simple smile, but it seemed to brighten and clean the entire world. At least, Han Yunqing's world was brightened. Gu Beiyue, why have you come? Han Yunqing was pleasantly surprised. In hindsight, she realized that little Er's worries were due to Gu Beiyue's reminder. Otherwise, how could a little brat like him, who spent most of his time cooped up at home and immersed himself in medicine, know so much about such complicated relationships? The free clinic is such a benevolent event. How could esteemed Wang Fei forget to call this one along? Gu Beiyue was serious. Without a doubt, Gu Beiyue was worried that she'd be schemed against and that this free clinic would be disrupted, so he'd specially come to help her. This fellow, helping her was one thing, but he could actually come up with such a high-sounding reason to ask her back. Even she, who had a tacit understanding between them, was too embarrassed to expose him. Actually, she'd long wanted to invite him, but was worried that he wouldn't come. After all, he was a servant in the palace. Wouldn't helping her and the Han family be the same as offending the Emperor and Empress Dowager? She didn't want to expose his intentions, but she still had to remind him of the complicated relationships involved. Han Yunqing said half-jokingly, Imperial Physician Gu, you'd better think it through. If you lose your job and the free clinic doesn't charge you, you'll have nothing to eat. Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. Based on his personality, there were only two possibilities for him to come. Either he already had a plan in mind, or he didn't want to think too much and followed his heart's truest feelings and came directly. No matter what, he was here. Esteemed Wang Fei, a doctor travels the world and earns a living based on his medical skills, not others. He smiled as he replied. His smile was always gentle. He was clearly a doctor who didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken, but he had the power to make people feel at ease. With his words, Han Yunqing set her worries at rest. Saying more and reminding more would instead be questioning and insulting him. Han Yunqing was very straightforward. Imperial Physician Gu, please. When Han Yunqing appeared at the door, the expectant crowd all wanted to kneel in greeting, but Han Yunqing immediately stopped them. Today, I'm only a doctor, not Qin Wangfei. Everyone, there's no need to stand on ceremony. If anyone wishes to kneel to Qin Wangfei, then please leave. Esteemed Wangfei won't be seeing patients. Her words were crisp and direct, without any pretense or pretense. Everyone who heard her felt admiration and thought of how the Duke of Qin and esteemed Wangfei had ridden back to the city on the same horse. Now it seemed that only a free and easy woman like this could enter His Highness Duke of Qin's eyes. There were many people seeking medical treatment, but there were also many onlookers. In a nearby tea house, Murong Wanru was sitting alone by the window. Cold as she watched the scene unfold, her lips quirked up in a mocking smile. Han Yunqing, the best part is yet to come. Murong Wanru was currently at Marquis Pingbei's estate. Aside from being dissatisfied with her husband, she was quite satisfied with everything else. At the Duke of Qin's estate, she was only an adopted daughter who had to look after Grand Concubine Yi's face. Now at Marquis Pingbei's estate, she was the Buddha of the house that everyone worshipped. This was the feeling of being a guest and a host. Wasn't that what she wanted the most? But she was very clear that if she didn't take care of Han Yunqing, that person in the palace would never allow her to live comfortably. This free medical consultation was a great opportunity for him to do so. But just as Murong Wanru was preparing to watch the show, Han Yunqing suddenly invited Gu Beiyue out. Everyone, today the South Clinic is extremely honored to have invited Imperial Physician Gu Beiyue to participate in the free clinic. I'm sure everyone knows of Imperial Physician Gu's medical skills. Let's not waste words and begin now. Han Yunqing and Gu Beiyue both sat down, but the entire scene was silent. Whether it was the patients in line or the onlookers, they were all stunned. Heavens, one Qin Wangfei was inconceivable enough, but now there was the head imperial physician. This time, the Han family really had too much face. Seventh Madam and Little E watched from inside the doors, very happy. It was as if they could see the Han family's future. Meanwhile, in the tea house, Murong Wanru had long risen to her feet in shock. Gu Beiyue. Gu Beiyue, why did he come? Did the Empress Dowager know about this? With Gu Beiyue here, what kind of difficult and complicated illness could be difficult for them to treat? At the very least, Murong Wanru couldn't find one right away. Murong Wanru didn't watch any longer, but hurried into the palace. Chapter 199. With Gu Beiyue holding the fort, the Han family clinic in the south of the city was bustling with activity. Leaving aside the wealthy families, many of the city's high officials and nobles, as well as members of the imperial family, had rushed over in hopes of getting a spot in the queue. As for the fact that Gu Beiyue was holding a clinic in the name of the Han family, it was completely ignored. Gu Beiyue was the head of the imperial physician courtyard and Emperor Tianhui's personal physician. Without Emperor Tianhui's appointment, who would be able to invite him if he didn't give them face? Murong Wanru hadn't even arrived when the Empress Dowager found out about Gu Beiyue's attendance at the clinic. Spies kept coming to report the bustling scene outside the south of the city, making her restless. Her anger grew stronger and stronger until she threw caution to the wind. Someone come, summon Gu Beiyue. Just say that I'm very uncomfortable. Have him come here immediately, the Empress Dowager ordered through gritted teeth. The eunuch was in a hurry to go, but Li Mama quickly stopped him. Mistress, you can't. Why can't I? He's an outsider, using the palace's salary to work for the Han family. Don't think I won't touch him just because his medical skills are superior. The Empress Dowager was furious. Esteemed Empress Dowager, that's a free clinic. All the common people in the city are watching. If you summon Imperial Physician Gu back like this, it'll have a bad influence. Li Mama's reminder calmed the Empress Dowager down. Li Mama was right. That was a free clinic. If she summoned Gu Beiyue back in front of everyone, if Han Yunqing took the chance to defame her, the common people wouldn't spare her. The Empress Dowager stood up and paced back and forth, not daring to act rashly, but unwilling to give up. Is this Gu Beiyue really stupid or pretending to be stupid? See how I deal with him when he comes back. The Empress Dowager was in a fit of anger when Murong Wanru arrived. She was about to complain when she saw the Empress Dowager's gloomy face and knew the situation wasn't good. But she was anxious and had to explain herself. Esteemed Empress Dowager, Wanru arranged everything long ago. This time, not only could Han Yunqing's reputation fall, but the Han family would never be able to rise again. But I didn't expect Imperial Physician Gu to. Enough. The Empress Dowager could not summon Gu Beiyue for the time being. She changed the topic and said sternly, put away your cheap tricks. Han Yunqing is not that easy to deal with. Aijia has reminded you again and again not to underestimate her. Did you listen? Murong Wanru was very unconvinced, but she didn't dare to refute. She hurriedly knelt down. Wanru has always remembered Her Highness the Empress Dowager's teachings and has never underestimated the enemy. But this time, what about this time? It's not like you haven't seen Han Yunqing's poison and medical skills before, but you're still trying to scheme against us at the free clinic? Did I overestimate you, or did you grow stupid because you've been too comfortable after marriage? The Empress Dowager asked angrily, clearly implying something. She'd only been married for a short time, so where did the word comfortable come from? Murong Wanru's heart trembled with fear. She didn't know how to reply, but the Empress Dowager changed the topic to a mocking laugh. The position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Appointments is a cushy one. A few days ago, the madams of Marquis Pingnan's estate and the Duke's estate both mentioned it to me. I was still undecided and didn't know who to give it to. Who knew? Your older brother from your maternal family has quite the skills. As expected, the Empress Dowager had been paying close attention to the developments at Marquis Pingbei's estate. Esteemed Empress Dowager, don't worry. Wanru knows what to do. May esteemed Empress Dowager give Wanru a few more days. As long as I find a chance, Wanru definitely won't. This was the third time the Empress Dowager had told Han Yunqing to stop. But this time, she didn't scold her, but kept her mocking smile as she beckoned for Murong Wanru to come over. It had to be said that this old lady was even harder to please than Grand Concubine Yi. She was so unpredictable that Murong Wanru couldn't figure her out. She stood up and walked over with quick steps, but the Empress Dowager took her hand and had her come closer. This was the first time they were so close. What did the Empress Dowager want to tell her? Murong Wanru's heart sped up as she had a bad premonition. Wanru, I'll point out a clear path for you, all right? The Empress Dowager's voice was very, very low, especially terrifying. A clear path? Did the Empress Dowager have a good way to deal with Han Yunqing? Although Murong Wanru was flustered, she was still happy. She hastened to reply, Wanru is slow-witted. May esteemed Empress Dowager give me more pointers. The Empress Dowager's smile deepened as her voice dropped even lower. Wanru, say, if Grand Concubine Yi dies by Han Yunqing's hands, will the Duke of Qin spare her? Murong Wanru immediately backed away at these words, her face ashen. She quickly muffled her mouth, afraid that she'd scream and startle the people around them. She never expected the Empress Dowager to be so direct as to take Grand Concubine Yi's life. Seeing Murong Wanru's shocked expression, the Empress Dowager calmly picked up a teacup and took a few slow sips. "What, did I scare you?" Murong Wanru admitted that she really was scared. She'd betrayed Grand Concubine Yi to rely on the Empress Dowager, but she'd never thought of harming Grand Concubine Yi's life. After all, she'd been adopted by Grand Concubine Yi since she was 6 years old. Without Grand Concubine Yi, she didn't even know if she'd still be alive, or where she'd be. She had a lot of resentment towards Grand Concubine Yi, but the person she wanted to deal with most was Han Yunqing. Murong Wanru stared blankly at the Empress Dowager without replying. Displeasure flitted through the Empress Dowager's eyes, but her face was still calm. She spoke as if chatting idly. "If the Duke of Qin can take the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Appointments, then I can at least take back the title of Marquis Pingbei." Murong Wanru was so frightened that her legs turned to jelly. She almost fell to her knees. "Esteemed Empress Dowager, have mercy! Have mercy!" The Empress Dowager couldn't stop the Duke of Qin from finding a position for Zhang Sun-che, but she had plenty of ways to have the Emperor destroy Marquis Pingbei's estate, strip away the hereditary title, confiscate the family's properties, and suppress Marquis Pingbei's estate to death. When the time came, would the Duke of Qin still interfere with court politics for her sake and clash with the Emperor again? Murong Wanru didn't believe he would. The fate of Marquis Pingbei's estate was her fate. Marquis Pingbei's honor and disgrace were her honor and disgrace as well. She couldn't bear the consequences. "You're a smart child. I've already pointed out the path for you. Go back and think over what you should do." The Empress Dowager didn't give Murong Wanru a chance to speak. She waved her hand, indicating for Murong Wanru to withdraw. She only sighed faintly. "Alas, remember, my patience is limited. I'll only give you 3 months. You can only succeed, not fail." Murong Wanru didn't know how she'd walked out, but her ears kept repeating the Empress Dowager's words. "Take back Marquis Pingbei's title, take back Marquis Pingbei's title." It wasn't until she left the palace gates and a cool breeze brushed against her face that Murong Wanru came to her senses. She immediately shook her head. No, she definitely wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. If Grand Concubine Yi dies at Han Yunqing's hands, if Grand Concubine Yi dies at Han Yunqing's hands? She muttered to herself. Suddenly, she realized that her previous methods were just as the Empress Dowager had said. They were all low-level tricks. They were nothing more than little tricks. The Empress Dowager's move was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. In the end, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. Murong Wanru's lips drew up in a sinister curve. By now, she'd already tossed Grand Concubine Yi's kindness to the back of her mind. She only had 3 months. This was a chance to fight for life after death. She wouldn't allow herself to fail. It looked like she'd have to go back to the Duke of Qin's estate more often in the coming days. Murong Wanru's men didn't make a move, and with Gu Beiyue keeping watch, the free clinic went smoothly for the entire day. Fortunately, 7th Madam had the foresight to limit the number of patients early on and refused to wait in line. Otherwise, Han Yunqing and Gu Beiyue wouldn't be able to finish until tomorrow night. This time's free clinic was a resounding success. Han Yunqing never thought that her success would spread her name throughout Cloud Realm Continent's medical community. Even the medical academy's classes mentioned her name. The free clinic had just finished packing up when someone made an appointment for next month's 15th. There were even people asking if the other 3 clinics would have free clinics as well and which doctors they'd invite. Han Yunqing helped tidy up as she tilted her head towards Gu Beiyue and asked in a low voice, "Imperial Physician Gu, will there be a next time?" Gu Beiyue only smiled wordlessly, but Han Yunqing knew there would be a next time. She smiled sweetly at Gu Beiyue. Seeing this woman so happy made Gu Beiyue happy as well. Actually, there wasn't just a next time, but the one after that. If possible, he hoped that he and Han Yunqing could keep up this act of kindness forever. Esteemed Wang Fei, let's put up the notice tonight. In the future, I'll be here with you on the 15th of every month. Gu Beiyue, you've got guts. Aren't you afraid that the masters of the palace will make trouble for you? Han Yunqing naturally hoped he'd come again, but she couldn't harm him. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't worry. I have my own ways to deal with them. Gu Beiyue's smile was very gentle, but it had its own reassuring power. This could be considered acting first and reporting later. Putting up the notice first and letting the entire city know, it would be difficult for the Empress Dowager or the Emperor to stop him from continuing to participate. As for what he would face after returning to the palace, he didn't want to think too much about it for now. Then next time, be there or be square. Han Yunqing was reassured. On the side, little Yi heard this and thought Gu Beiyue was about to leave. He ran over in a hurry and hugged Gu Beiyue. Big brother Beiyue, my mother said you've worked hard today. You've contributed the most, so she wants you to come to the estate for a meal. You can't leave. Han Yunqing raised an eyebrow as she studied the little brat. She asked seriously, when did you start calling me Big brother Beiyue? How come I didn't know? He's contributed the most, but I've contributed the most too. Little Yi was still shy. His little face reddened as he hid behind Gu Beiyue. He had been assisting Big Brother Beiyue today and discovered that Big Brother Beiyue was the most approachable and gentle person in the world. How he wished Big Brother Beiyue could become his brother-in-law. Unfortunately, he already had one. He had never seen his brother-in-law before, but he had heard many people say that his brother-in-law was the most arrogant and coldest person in the world. Gu Beiyue smiled and said nothing. Little Yi carefully poked his head out again and actually said, Big sis, mother was afraid Big Brother Beiyue wouldn't give her face, so she wants you to invite him. Han Yunqing couldn't tease him anymore. Gu Beiyue laughed out loud and pulled little Yi in front of him. He rubbed his little head and teased, then go ask your big sis. Is she inviting him or not? Little Yi was serious. He immediately looked back at Han Yunqing. Big sis, hurry up and invite Big Brother Beiyue. Mother has prepared a lot of delicious food. Is this child a little smarter, or a little dumber? Han Yunqing smiled helplessly. Gu Beiyue, will you do me the honor? It will be my honor. Of course Gu Beiyue would agree. Chapter 200. Just as Yi had said, 7th Madam had prepared a table of delicacies and fine wine to celebrate Han Yunqing and the rest. Not just Yi but even 7th Madam had a particularly good impression of Gu Beiyue. Gu Beiyue had changed out of his white medical gown and was now wearing a crescent white gown. He looked like a gentleman from an aristocratic family, gentle as jade. There wasn't much etiquette at the dining table. Instead, they chatted and laughed. However, just as they were happily chatting, a golden needle suddenly flew towards Han Yunqing and accurately landed in Han Yunqing's bowl. Gu Beiyue's eyes flashed. He was about to make a move when he saw the golden needle in the bowl and suddenly froze. It was a 5-bladed plum blossom needle, the lowest grade of the Tang clan's needles. However, even if it was the lowest grade, it wasn't that easy to obtain the real thing. Judging from the craftsmanship and material of this plum blossom needle, it was definitely from the Tang clan. Was it someone from the Tang clan? Before anyone could react, Gu Beiyue's mind flashed with multiple thoughts and hypotheses. Still, his gentle, jade-like face didn't betray any of them. Han Yunqing stood up abruptly. At this moment, Yi and 7th Madam panicked. 7th Madam instinctively shielded Yi in her arms and immediately shouted, "Guards! Guard!" Before she could shout a second time, a man dressed in red appeared out of thin air and landed in front of 7th Madam. He lowered his head slightly, like a mysterious fox demon from a dark world, his entire body emitting a dangerous aura. His long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly as he gave Seventh Madam a meaningful look. Seventh Madam was so frightened that she couldn't close her gaping mouth and couldn't make a sound. On the other side, Han Yunqing said sternly, "Gu, it's you again." Even if the Han clan's guards came, they wouldn't be able to deal with this guy. Han Yunqing directly rushed over and stretched out her arms to protect Seventh Madam and behind her. She fiercely questioned, "You're haunting us. What do you want?" Faced with Han Yunqing's ferocious attitude, Gu Qishao didn't get angry. Instead, his dark eyes lit up. He didn't know if he would mind if this woman really wanted to kill him one day. In any case, he didn't take the poisoning incident to heart. Although his long and narrow eyes were still narrowed, his smile was especially mischievous. "I won't really hurt you, why are you so nervous? You're scaring me." Han Yunqing said unhappily, her gaze drifting to his right hand. Seeing that it was perfectly fine except for a thin layer of gauze, she finally relaxed. Her glance didn't escape Gu Qishao's eyes. Delighted, he waved his hand in front of Han Yunqing's face. "What, are you worried about my hand? Why isn't it? It's such a waste of my poison." Han Yunqing's tone was sharp and vicious, but Gu didn't mind. However, these days, the Long Fei Ye's secret guards had been secretly following Han Yunqing. When the secret guards didn't enter the Han residence, Gu slipped in. With Gu Beiyue's shout, it was terrible. Reality proved that Gu's good temper was only towards Han Yunqing. Gu's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness and he viciously threw the plum blossom needle at Gu Beiyue. "Meddling in other people's business, go to hell." He was so ruthless that it was as if he had turned into a different person. He immediately turned to leave after throwing the needle. His right hand was still injured, so he had no choice but to leave. The strength and speed of the plum blossom needle was not inferior to the standard of a concealed weapon expert. Gu Beiyue seemed to be scared out of his wits as he stood rooted to the ground. "Dodge it!" Han Yunqing shouted. However, even she felt that it was too late. The plum blossom needle was about to sink into Gu Beiyue's heart. She closed her eyes in despair, not daring to look. Seventh Madam and Little were already scared out of their wits and had their eyes tightly shut. However, they didn't see that just a second before the plum blossom needle was about to sink into Gu Beiyue's heart, Gu Beiyue revealed a faint smile. An invisible force silently flowed out of his body and silently caused the plum blossom needle to deviate. Everything happened in an instant. The five-bladed plum blossom needle pierced into the right side of his heart. It was very, very deep. One could imagine that if it had sunk into his heart, he would have died without a doubt. She wondered how Gu would feel if he knew that he had failed and couldn't even kill a weak imperial physician. In short, when Han Yunqing opened her eyes and saw Gu Beiyue clutching his chest and kneeling on the ground, she was scared out of her wits and rushed over without thinking. "Gu Beiyue! Hang in there! You must hang in there!" Gu Beiyue's face was deathly pale. There was a large patch of blood on his chest and hands. He raised his head to look at Han Yunqing and immediately fainted. Han Yunqing had saved many people in her previous life and this life. No matter how serious or urgent the injury was, as long as she started to act, once she entered the state of mind, she could calmly calm down. However, this time, she couldn't calm down. She couldn't imagine how sad she would be if this man with superb medical skills and gentle as jade died just like that. She should have immediately checked the wound, stopped the bleeding, assessed the risk of pulling out the concealed weapon, and prepared for heavy bleeding. However, she panicked and messed up her order. She used all her strength to rummage through her medical bag, taking out all her instruments and medicines. Perhaps, she wasn't panicking, but was afraid. How could Gu Qishao miss when faced with a person who didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken? This process was very delicate and complicated. If it was done manually, who knew how long it would take? However, it was handed over to the detoxification system. Han Yunqing only needed to spend a little energy. Actually, making poison was considered easy for her. However, she didn't know why, but she felt more tired and time-consuming every time she activated the detoxification system. The detoxification system hadn't been used for long, so it couldn't have aged so quickly. She didn't think too much about it. She just assumed that she had been too tired and didn't have time to recuperate. Soon, the detoxification system gave her the best formula. The best formula was to completely melt the golden needles, producing the least amount of poison and spreading the slowest. Poison doctors not only detoxified, but also used poison to save people. As long as the golden needles in Gu Beiyue's body were melted into poison, then Han Yunqing wouldn't have to remove the needles, but detoxify and expel the poison. Han Yunqing felt that compared to the detoxification system, she was a genius for coming up with such a tactful method. She opened her eyes. Although they were bloodshot, they were still bright. A confident smile flashed across her face. She elegantly stretched out her hand, and a bottle of poison appeared in her hand out of thin air. She didn't know that at this moment, she was like a mysterious and noble magician. At least, in Gu Beiyue's eyes, she was very, very beautiful. Next, it was time for her to do what she was best at. Outside the door, little sat upright in front of the door. His back was ramrod straight, and his arms were crossed over his chest. His tender little face was filled with seriousness, and he looked just like a little door god. Seventh concubine and the housekeeper asked little but he didn't know anything either. They waited by the side, burning with anxiety. If something happened to the emperor's imperial physician in the Han residence, it would be very troublesome. Half an hour later, there was still no movement. Han Yunqing detoxified the poison, and it was her own poison. Did she need half an hour? She only made a small incision on Gu Beiyue's chest and used her unique acupuncture technique to expel all the poison. At this time, the wound had been cleaned, treated with anti-inflammatory and hemostatic herbs, and bandaged. It could be said that it was very successful. At this moment, she was stunned in front of the bed. What happened? More than half of Gu Beiyue's shirt was torn, revealing his perfect chest muscles. It was hard to imagine that a weak man who used to be a pot of medicine, a man who was as gentle as jade and as gentle as the moon, could have such sexy chest muscles. They were full and strong, and filled with masculine strength. Any woman who saw them couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. Han Yunqing had been busy with the treatment and didn't notice Gu Beiyue's good figure. Now, as if she had discovered a shocking secret, she was shocked to her core. Her gaze followed the mesmerizing texture of his body, and she couldn't help but move downwards. She couldn't help but imagine what kind of lean, strong, and handsome man was hiding under the snow-white clothes. Suddenly, at this moment, Gu Beiyue moved. His hand that was hanging by the side slowly clenched. Han Yunqing finally came back to her senses and gave a start. She realized that she had been too distracted. A gentle and warm man paired with a fierce man's body. Alright, she admitted that she had been mesmerized. However, she quickly pretended that she hadn't seen anything and quickly moved forward. Gu Beiyue slowly opened his eyes. Before using the poison, Han Yunqing had given him an anesthetic, so he was now awake. Don't move, the wound has just been treated. Han Yunqing seriously said. Gu Beiyue looked at her for a while before saying, Princess Consort, I didn't die. I also thought that you would die, but you are a good person. Good people have good lives. Han Yunqing's words were very serious. She had thought that Gu would take Gu Beiyue's life with a single needle, but who knew that it would be so close? She explained this matter to Gu Beiyue. Gu Beiyue let out a sigh of relief. It must be because of the Princess Consort's good fortune that I was able to avoid this disaster. Han Yunqing couldn't help rolling her eyes. Gu Beiyue, when did you become so good at flattering people? It was clearly me who implicated you. Gu Beiyue gave a shy smile. Princess Consort, I was so scared at that time. When I realized what was going on, I didn't think too much and directly called for help. Isn't this Gu a friend of yours and His Highness? How could it be? Han Yunqing gave a fake smile. Who is his friend? At most, we know each other. Anyway, it's a long story. A complicated look flickered past Gu Beiyue's eyes before he asked, Princess Consort, I heard you say before that these assassination needles belong to the Tang clan. You know about the Tang clan too? Han Yunqing was doubtful. Gu Beiyue was only a doctor, so how could he know about Jianghu matters? The Tang clan's assassination weapons are very famous throughout Cloud Realm continent. I've heard people mention them in Medical City when I was young, Gu Beiyue replied. Han Yunqing nodded, not intending to continue the topic. She casually pulled up a brocade quilt for Gu Beiyue and called for 7th Madam and Little E, to enter. Gu Beiyue finally realized that his upper body was half naked. His ears turned red as he silently pulled the quilt over himself. 7th Madam and Little E, both beamed with joy when they saw that Gu Beiyue was fine. 7th Madam urged Gu Beiyue to stay at the estate for a few days to recover, but Gu Beiyue insisted on returning home. Han Yunqing personally escorted him back to the Gu estate and told the medical attendant how to change his dressing. She was about to leave when Han Yunqing doubled back. Gu Beiyue, today's matter, but before she could finish, Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. Don't worry, Princess Consort. This one won't say a thing. What a smart man. Han Yunqing discovered that she liked this man more and more. She smiled like a flower and nodded before leaving. Gu Beiyue gently stroked the wound on his chest and muttered, Gu, could it be that you're like me, from that place and looking for the poison woman too? Han Yunqing could take poison out of thin air. What kind of skills was that? Could she be the person he was looking for? One had to know that without the detoxification system, she wouldn't be able to survive in the crude medical conditions of ancient times. Thinking back, her exhaustion after returning from Medicine City should be related to the detoxification system's upgrade. However, Han Yunqing couldn't understand. How did the detoxification system upgrade for no reason? Could it be that after the upgrade, there would be new functions? Was the nightmare just now a coincidence, or was there another reason? Her divine sense could control the detoxification system, but she had never been able to enter the detoxification system to see the things in the space. The feeling in the nightmare was as if her soul and body were separated, and her soul walked into the space. Just how many surprises or scares had the engineers who developed this system prepared for her? Han Yunqing patted her chest. No matter what, as long as the system didn't go crazy or break down, it wasn't a scare. The upgrade was good, too. She could use this time to rest. As for learning the Tang clan's assassination weapons, she could only postpone it for now. In the following days, Han Yunqing went to the Han family clinic, then to the Gu estate to check on Gu Beiyue's wounds. She spent the rest of her time obediently staying at home. The detoxification system's upgrade really did consume a lot of her energy. By the time she woke up, it was already close to noon. Before, she would go to Grand Concubine Yi's courtyard to sit for a while after meals, but now that she was full, she would slip back to her attic to sleep. The more Zhao Mama looked at her, the more she felt that something was off. Finally, she spoke up at mealtime. Esteemed Wang Fei, you seem to be very sleepy these days. It's spring fatigue. Han Yunqing was almost falling asleep as she ate her lunch. Spring fatigue isn't that serious. Zhao Mama hesitated, then said, Esteemed Wang Fei, how about we call Imperial Physician Li over for a look? It's fine, I'm a doctor myself. Han Yunqing stretched lazily and prepared to leave when Zhao Mama grew anxious. Esteemed Wang Fei, you can't be careless when it comes to things like this. What if you're pregnant? Pfft, Han Yunqing spat out the tea she'd been rinsing her mouth with. She was still trying to figure out how to answer Zhao Mama when a light cough came from the door. Cough cough, if Han Yunqing still had tea in her mouth, she would have spat it out again. That was because the person standing at the door was none other than Long Fei Yi. When did this guy get here? Did he hear anything? Only Long Fei himself knew whether or not he'd heard anything. He walked over expressionlessly as Han Yunqing and Zhao Mama hastily paid their respects. Zhao Mama's eyes flashed shrewdly as she spoke before Han Yunqing could. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei has been drowsy recently. From this old servant's experience, it's very possible that she's pregnant. Chapter 203. Han Yunqing rejoiced that she hadn't begged him. Although face wasn't worth much, at least she'd saved herself once. Last time, she already knew that Long Fei Yi had intentions to cultivate her after killing the poison humans. She was more than willing to accept the condition of not being a burden when she went out to do things. A husband and wife relationship in name would not last long after all. So what if the rumors of her being favored spread like wildfire? Not to mention outsiders, even Granny Zhao, who was by her side, was trying to find out if she was really favored or not. Even those noble madams with status, children, and backing had to fight to keep their positions, to say nothing of her who had nothing at all. How long could such an awkward status support her position in the Duke of Qin's estate and Tianning's imperial clan? On the second day of her marriage, she told herself that she couldn't escape the shackles of fate. The only thing she could do was hold on to Long Fei Yi as her greatest backer. The best way to conquer a man was to conquer his stomach. This saying was pure nonsense. Actually, the best way to conquer a man was to have him conquer you of his own accord. Thinking up to here, Han Yunqing unconsciously licked her lips as the shocking scene from before resurfaced in her mind. He'd said, Han Yunqing, from today onwards, your innocence is your lordship's. Did he count as conquering her? No, he was just claiming ownership of an object. Using the word, conquer, on a great deity like Long Fei didn't matter whether he was doing it on his own initiative or passively. No matter how Han Yunqing thought about it, it sounded like a fantasy story. She shook her head to block out the thought. She only wanted a place to settle down in the Duke of Qin's estate and let that guy see her value. That way, he wouldn't kick her aside one day when he was in a bad mood. She'd work hard to learn the Tang clan's assassination weapons. Han Yunqing was lost in her thoughts when Zhao Mama happily came to invite her over. Esteemed Wang Fei, Imperial Physician Li is waiting in the courtyard's guest hall. Esteemed Imperial Concubine is there too, so hurry over. As expected, the news had alarmed Grand Concubine Yi. Han Yunqing was extremely sleepy, but she had no choice but to keep her spirits up and follow Zhao Mama. Unexpectedly, it wasn't just Grand Concubine Yi, but Murong Wanru as well. According to etiquette, a married daughter wouldn't easily return to her mother's home, but Grand Concubine Yi doted on Murong Wanru and didn't fuss too much over it. Murong Wanru seemed to be running to the Duke of Qin's estate quite diligently recently. Seeing her arrive, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't wait to rise to welcome her, pulling Han Yunqing carefully to sit down. She was even more cordial than usual. Yunqi, you've been feeling unwell for so long. Why didn't you tell Mufei? What if he broke his bones? Han Yunqing saw that it was a pretty good nourishing prescription, so she accepted it. Mufei, the spring hunt is next month. Doesn't that mean sister-in-law won't be able to participate? Murong Wanru had come today precisely for this matter. The spring hunt around the Qingming festival was a grand occasion in Tianning country. If Marquis Pingbei's estate had already received an invitation, then the Duke of Qin's estate would naturally receive one earlier. The spring hunt was an excellent opportunity. The Empress Dowager had only given her 3 months, so she had to make good use of it. Yunqi, next month's spring hunt is your first time participating in it, so you can't miss it. Take good care of your body so you don't delay things when the time comes, Grand Concubine Yi instructed, her interest waning. Yes, Han Yunqing didn't say much, but obediently nodded her head. Murong Wanru kept her company, so Han Yunqing didn't stay long before leaving with Zhao Mama, who comforted her the entire way. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't be sad. Things like this depend on fate. You can't just say it'll happen. Take care of your body first. As long as the green hills remain, there's no need to worry about firewood. Esteemed Wang Fei, walk slower. I heard that the Western Lake doctor has a prescription for medicine that many imperial concubines in the palace have asked for. If it's really effective, this old servant will secretly ask for one for you later. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't suffocate yourself. Your body isn't good to begin with, so suffocating will hurt your body. Things like children should be taken slowly. You and His Highness are both young, so there's no rush. Finally, Han Yunqing stopped walking. She looked at Zhao Mama, feeling both angry and amused. But in the end, she felt warmth. It was great that there were still people in this world who truly cared about her. Not wanting to deceive this kind-hearted Mama, Han Yunqing changed the topic. Mama, tell me about Miss Wanru. What does esteemed Wang Fei want to know? This old servant will definitely tell you everything I know. Zhao Mama was very enthusiastic. How did she get adopted by Grand Concubine Yi? What about her birth parents? Han Yunqing asked seriously. Zhao Mama began to recall. Back then, the late emperor was still alive and didn't have a Duke of Qin's estate. The crown prince consort, who's now esteemed empress, wanted to choose a few court ladies to play with for Princess Changping. Miss Wanru was one of the candidates, but Grand Concubine Yi happened to bump into her. After giving birth to His Highness Duke of Qin, she couldn't have any more children and always wanted a daughter. It must be fate. She fell in love with Miss Wanru as soon as she saw her and adopted her. She's always been an adopted daughter and never been conferred the title of princess. Later on, the late emperor passed away, so no one did. Han Yunqing listened carefully before asking, then what about her birth parents? Haven't they contacted them in the past few years? Even if they entered the palace as servants, they could still leave regularly to visit their family. Han Yunqing had married into the palace for so long, but she'd never heard of Murong Wanru having any relatives. I heard she was an orphan raised by relatives. We met a few times when she was young, but they all passed away later on, Zhao Mama replied honestly. Han Yunqing nodded thoughtfully, then asked, why didn't they confer her the title of princess back then? If they did, then Murong Wanru's status would be completely different now. Even the people in the estate wouldn't call her Miss Wanru now. Grand Concubine Yi doted on Murong Wanru so much, so there was no reason for that. Zhao Mama didn't understand either, but guessed, perhaps Grand Concubine Yi only wanted to raise her first. Later on, the late emperor passed away and the crown prince took the throne. Grand Concubine Yi couldn't bring up the matter anymore. Han Yunqing felt that something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Chapter 204. At dawn, Han Yunqing arrived at Long Fei Ye's courtyard. She was afraid that she would oversleep, so she asked Granny Zhao to wake her up. She thought that she would come early, but who knew that Long Fei Yi was already making tea in the courtyard. She took a deep breath of the green tea in the fresh morning air, and her whole body suddenly felt refreshed. Compared to a man who drank wine, Han Yunqing preferred a man who drank tea. Today, Long Fei Yi was dressed in a loose white robe. His black hair was casually tied up with a jade hairpin, but he was less cold than usual and more casual. However, he was still in a world of his own. Even when she walked in front of him, Han Yunqing still felt that they were people from two different worlds. Good morning. She smiled and sat down without being invited. He nodded slightly and poured a cup of tea for her. He didn't talk much and directly asked, did you bring the hidden weapons? In fact, Han Yunqing originally wanted to gossip about the friendship between this guy and Tang Li. Judging from Gu's reaction, it was really not easy to get the Tang sect's hidden weapons. Not only did Tang Li lend her the Pearflower Storm Needles, but he also gave her a lot of hidden weapons. It seemed that he was threatened by Long Feiyi, but in fact, he was giving face to Long Feiyi. However, no matter how good their friendship was, he didn't have to be so generous. Gu suspected that she had something to do with the Tang sect, but she, who knew the truth, suspected that Long Feiyi had something to do with the Tang sect. Seeing Long Feiyi's cold expression, Han Yunqing gave up. After all, it took courage to gossip about this guy. She took out 5 kinds of golden needles and hidden weapons and arranged them on the stone table in a row. They were the plum blossom needle, the finger needle, the acupoint needle, the roe needle, and the mouth needle. Do you still remember how to use them? Long Feiyi asked again. Different needles had different usages and required different eyesight, hand strength, and internal energy. Han Yunqing nodded seriously. Her attitude was as proper as that of a primary school student. She repeated what Long Feiyi had taught her that day. Although the other party was taking the initiative to teach her, she couldn't be arrogant just because he was pampered. Of course, the most important thing was that if she was humble, perhaps this fellow would teach her more when he was in a good mood. Eyesight shouldn't be difficult for you, right? Long Feiyi asked indifferently. If you have enough strength, it shouldn't be a problem for you to hit 100% of the time. Han Yunqing was not bragging. Her eyesight was her strength. As a doctor, especially a doctor like her who relied on acupuncture for a living, she could almost find the location of every acupuncture point on a person's body at a glance. She was also very clear about the weaknesses of the human body. Long Feiyi nodded and gently rolled up his sleeves. He placed his hand on the table and assumed a posture of arm wrestling. Han Yunqing was stunned at the sight. What are you doing? To test the potential of your hand's strength, hand. Long Feiyi was really a man of few words. Han Yunqing didn't quite understand, but she obediently stretched out her hand. But just as she was about to touch Long Feiyi's large hand, she suddenly slowed down. Arm wrestling, she had to hold his hand. She hesitated and moved closer little by little. The closer she got, the slower she moved. It's just to test the level of your hand strength. What are you afraid of? Long Feiyi asked. Oh. She wasn't afraid, but she was inexplicably nervous. Wasn't it just a handshake? Han Yunqing secretly took a breath. Her small hand finally slowly touched Long Feiyi's large hand. But once she touched it, she instinctively retracted her hand. It was so cold. Long Feiyi's patience was limited. He wanted to urge her, but he suddenly seemed to realize something. His deep eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. He looked at Han Yunqing and asked with interest, "You don't dare?" Did she not dare to touch, or did she not dare to try? His words were ambiguous and provocative. The speaker had his own meaning, and the listener had their own understanding. It was really thought-provoking. Of course, in Han Yunqing's understanding, the word ambiguous did not exist in Long Feiyi's world. She only took it as a provocation from Long Feiyi. She despised herself in her heart. She wasn't a love-struck fool, so why did she always think in the wrong direction when facing this guy? Look at how magnanimous he was. What was her mind full of? If he knew what she was thinking, she would definitely be disgusted. Coughing lightly, Han Yunqing calmed down and smiled. Your Highness, don't let me win. Long Feiyi's hand was still there. He raised his eyebrows, indicating that he wouldn't. Han Yunqing reached out her hand again. This time, her movements were nimble, and she directly grabbed Long Feiyi's large hand. His hand was naturally cold, and because of holding a sword for many years, it was hard and rough. Her hand was soft, her skin was creamy, and as gentle as water. Climbing up like this, the soft touch made Long Feiyi feel very comfortable. A strong desire to possess arose in him. Gradually, his originally deep eyes became abnormally deep. His hand was long, and her hand was short. Compared to supporting herself on the table, there was a large difference. Han Yunqing's fingers barely managed to hold onto his hand, but she didn't hold it tightly. She hesitated for a moment, and her small hand actually carefully climbed up bit by bit. Her warm palm gently rubbed against his cold palm. She only wanted to hold it a little higher, but she didn't know that her actions were a great provocation to the self-control of the man in front of her. Chu Shifeng narrowly avoided falling over as his expression turned stiff. So she was going to test him. Han Yunqing waved her hand and told him to hurry and keep his distance. She'd tried the pear blossom rain needles before, so this pear blossom teardrop rain shouldn't disappoint her too much. Yes. The secret guard accepted the order and left. However, he was puzzled in his heart. Why didn't His Highness have any opinion about Imperial concubine dowager traveling with the other three families? The carriage sped along and soon left the capital city. The carriage leading the way was in the lead, followed by Grand Concubine Yi's carriage, while the other three families followed closely behind. The entire way, Murong Wanru kept Grand Concubine Yi company and chatted. As expected of a mother and daughter who'd been together for years, Murong Wanru could always amuse Grand Concubine Yi with a single sentence. Topic after topic, it seemed like they'd never run out. This made it impossible for Han Yunqing, who was nestled on one side, to fall asleep. Moreover, Han Yunqing wasn't familiar with their topics, so she couldn't get a word in edgewise. She was too lazy to join in on the fun, so she simply leaned against the window to enjoy the scenery. But gradually, Han Yunqing felt that something was off. Why did the carriage seem more and more desolate? She turned back and asked, "Mu Fei, aren't we taking the main road?" There was a main road from the capital city to Bi's county that was smooth and easy to travel on. Although Han Yunqing didn't know the road, she could tell from her surroundings that it wasn't a main road at all. Grand Concubine Yi was so engrossed in conversation that she didn't hear Han Yunqing's question clearly. "What?" she asked offhandedly. "Mu Fei, did we go the wrong way? What is this place?" Han Yunqing asked seriously. Only then did Grand Concubine Yi grow suspicious. She was about to look out the window when the carriage abruptly stopped. "Ah!" Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru shrieked at the same time as they fell forward. Fortunately, Han Yunqing reacted quickly enough to press one hand against the window while the other grabbed Grand Concubine Yi's hand. Grand Concubine Yi steadied herself, but Murong Wanru slammed into the door frame. Before they could recover their wits, a guard's voice came from outside. "There's an assassin. Protect the masters well." "Assassin? Heavens!" Grand Concubine Yi shrieked, her face draining of color as she shrank back. It wasn't that she wasn't calm, but that she'd rarely encountered danger in her life. Murong Wanru's eyes flashed coldly as she shrank back to Grand Concubine Yi's side. In a panic, she asked, "Mu Fei, what do we do? How could there be an assassin? How could Grand Concubine Yi know that mother and daughter were soon hugging each other?" At this moment, the sounds of fighting outside grew louder and louder. The clanging of weapons against each other was enough to shake people to their core. Judging by the sounds, there were plenty of assassins. "Wanru, take good care of Mu Fei." Han Yunqing made a prompt decision and left these words behind before getting off the carriage. Seeing this, Murong Wanru was both surprised and delighted. Han Yunqing, Han Yunqing. Chapter 207. Murong Wanru lost all sense of reason as soon as she gave vent. Or rather, she'd been irrational from the moment she decided to kill Grand Concubine Yi. Looking at Grand Concubine Yi's terrified expression, she completely forgot that she'd still be a nameless court lady if it wasn't for Grand Concubine Yi. Perhaps she'd even be buried with Princess Changping. All she could think about now was how Grand Concubine Yi hadn't done her best to help her, protect her, or make her a concubine of the Duke of Qin. This was probably the so-called, when you raise rice and hate it when you raise it. Ever since I was young, I've had to do my best to guess at your intentions and serve you carefully, afraid that you'd send me back to the palace if you weren't happy. Why did I do all this? Grand Concubine Yi, 7 years ago you told me you were going to marry me off to the Duke of Qin. What happened in the end? You married me off to that coward Zhang Sun Che. Why are you so good to Han Yunqing? Although I'm not your biological daughter, I've served you for so many years. Can't I compare to a single Han Yunqing? Tell me. The more Murong Wanru spoke, the angrier she got. Grand Concubine Yi's tears flowed even more violently. Even with the needle at her neck, she shook her head to deny everything Murong Wanru said. It wasn't like that. She'd treated Wanru well with all her heart these past few years, so why would Wanru think this way? In her heart, Wanru was much more important than Han Yunqing. No matter how well Han Yunqing did, she was still an outsider. What, did I say something wrong? Murong Wanru laughed coldly. In any case, you're about to lose your life, so I might as well tell you. I was the one who spread the news of Han Yunqing's medical skills. I was also the one who instigated Lady Su to cause a ruckus at the gates. And also, speaking up to here, Murong Wanru seemed to recall something as her gaze turned ruthless. And also, the plum blossom meet was arranged by me and Princess Changping. Zhang Sun Che should have violated Han Yunqing, not me, not me. By the end, Murong Wanru was close to Grand Concubine Yi's face and growled, it shouldn't have been me. As soon as she finished speaking, the needle in her hand abruptly pierced into Grand Concubine Yi's neck before digging deeper. Woo woo woo, woo woo, Grand Concubine Yi was very surprised. She never expected Murong Wanru to be the one behind all this. She looked at Murong Wanru with teary eyes, but Murong Wanru had already sunk into a crazed state. She looked at her emotionlessly, as if admiring her. Her neck hurt so much. More blood was flowing out. She was going to die. She would definitely die. But nobody knew that Grand Concubine Yi's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Even the pain in her neck couldn't compare to the pain in her heart. No, Wanru can't kill her. Anyone in the world can kill her except Wanru. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She had 39 golden needles in her hand. Some were non-poisonous, some were poisonous, and the poisonous ones were divided into several types. She narrowed her eyes and activated the mechanism without hesitation. It wasn't just one needle, but several golden needles shot out at the same time towards Jun Yixie's crotch. The result was very much worth looking forward to. But no one expected that at the same time Han Yunqing shot out the needles, Murong Wanru, who was at the top, suddenly flipped over and directly blocked the golden needles that were about to fly out. Damn it! This time, Han Yunqing directly cursed. The intoxicating scene by the window had already disappeared. Jun Yixie and Long Fei Yi had both left the carriage and gone off to fight. At this moment, Han Yunqing wanted to turn Murong Wanru into a hedgehog. But Murong Wanru was sprawled on one side, unmoving, as if she'd fainted away. Alright, all 5 super strong anesthetic needles had landed on her body. If she hadn't fainted, Han Yunqing would be crying. With Murong Wanru gone, Han Yunqing pushed Grand Concubine Yi to one side. Grand Concubine Yi had long fainted from fright and was now lying next to Murong Wanru. Han Yunqing glanced at Murong Wanru with hesitation in her eyes, but she quickly looked away. Hearing the fierce fighting outside, Han Yunqing carefully poked her head out of the carriage window. As expected, the people outside had long turned into a mass of slaughter. Han Yunqing still had assassination weapons in her hands, so she had to help out a bit. But in front of her was a sea of black-robed experts fighting. Besides Chu Shifeng, Han Yunqing couldn't tell who was on her side and who was her enemy. Outside of them, Long Fei Yi and Zhu Nixia were fighting in the air. Thus, Han Yunqing's target was once again Zhu Nixia. Zhu Nixia must have used poison, because Long Fei Yi was clearly dodging. Otherwise, his style would have been fast, accurate, and ruthless. Long Fei Yi kept trying to pull away, but Zhu Nixia refused to let go. Judging from the current situation, the two of them were evenly matched. If this stalemate continued, Long Fei Yi would be the one to suffer. After all, Zhu Nixia's poison skills had the upper hand. A single misstep and Long Fei Yi would be finished. Damned poison skills. Han Yunqing watched carefully as she silently analyzed the situation. For a trash like her to be able to analyze things to this extent, she considered herself pretty good. If she had the pear blossom rain needles in her hands, she would have attacked Zhu Nixia without hesitation. But she had the pear blossom teardrop rain needles in her hands, which was 3 times weaker than the pear blossom rain needles. She had to find the best position for herself. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, she shrunk her head and bent her waist. Like a little mouse, she quietly crawled out of the carriage window and rolled onto the ground to pretend to be a corpse. Her small mouth gradually revealed a smug smile. At such a close distance, the opportunity had come again. She quietly turned around and lay on her back. She narrowed her eyes and aimed. Just like this, without Long Fei Yi and Zhu Nixia noticing, she lightly touched her wrist. In an instant, the newly installed 39 poisoned golden needles in pear blossom teardrop rain shot out like a rain of needles towards Zhu Nixia. Zhu Nixia was wholeheartedly focused on fighting Long Fei Yi. How could he be on guard against Han Yunqing? He knew that Han Yunqing's poison skills were very powerful. However, he also knew that Han Yunqing's poison skills were trash. Needles after needles entered his body without warning. A few of them even flew past his face. Zhu Nixia was stunned. He never expected Han Yunqing to be able to shoot out needles with such speed and strength. While he was still stunned, Long Fei Yi's sword-on swept towards him mercilessly, aiming for his waist. With the needles in his body and Long Fei's fatal blow, Zhu Nixia was sent flying backwards into a large tree and quickly fell to the ground. The loud crash attracted the attention of all the black-robed experts. Seeing their master injured, all of them backed away to protect Zhu Nixia. They could vaguely see that Zhu Nixia had already crawled to his feet and turned to flee. Chu Shifeng immediately led the black-robed guards in pursuit. Long Fei Yi's lips curved into a mocking smile as he raised his sword to chase after them. But it was then that Han Yunqing grabbed his hand. "What are you doing?" Long Fei Yi asked coldly. "Don't chase." Han Yunqing was very serious. She'd hesitated before, but there was no time to hesitate now. "Let go." Long Fei Yi didn't even ask for a reason, but viciously shook off Han Yunqing's hand. He couldn't lose this chance. He'd been waiting for Zhu Nixia for a long time, so he couldn't let him escape this time. But Han Yunqing ran in front of him. "I have something very important to discuss with you. I have to say it now." For the first time, Long Fei Yi felt that Han Yunqing was no different from any other woman. She was unreasonable and only made trouble. Cold, he glared at her before turning to leave. Han Yunqing couldn't stop him, so she grew anxious and blurted out, "Do you know that Murong Wanru is Grand Concubine Yi's biological daughter? You're an adopted child." At these words, Long Fei Yi abruptly stopped and spun around to look at Han Yunqing. In a flash, his eyes flashed with frightening killing intent. This woman, how did she know about this secret? Seeing Long Fei Ye's reaction, Han Yunqing knew she'd successfully stopped him. She didn't notice the killing intent in Long Fei Ye's eyes as she hastily explained, they were in the carriage. Murong Wanru wanted to kill Grand Concubine Yi to frame me. Grand Concubine Yi said it herself. I only heard it by accident. Just then, I accidentally injured Murong Wanru. It was anesthetic poison. Qinxie will definitely keep her mouth shut and won't tell anyone. Your Highness gave Qinxie assassination weapons with the intention of training Qinxie. Qinxie definitely won't disappoint your Highness. Qinxie is willing to go through water and tread on fire for your Highness without hesitation. Han Yunqing didn't stop for a single breath. She spoke until she was almost out of breath. She looked at Long Fei Yi, her eyes as pure as a newborn. Even when she'd sworn an oath to study medicine, she'd never been so earnest and sincere. But Long Fei Ye's gaze was as cold as ever as he asked, why should your lordship believe you? Because Qinxie and your Highness are husband and wife. We're on the same boat. The Han family has already fallen, so Qinxie relies on your Highness. Your Highness's safety and honor are Qinxie's safety and honor. If your Highness lives, Qinxie lives. If your Highness dies, Qinxie dies. Qinxie has no reason to betray your Highness. Han Yunqing explained hastily. Even if you die, you still can't betray your lordship. Long Fei Yi was expressionless. This wasn't a rhetorical question, but an ironclad fact. Han Yunqing wasn't sure why, but her heart suddenly clenched even though she was clearly afraid. An indescribable sourness rose up, making her feel more uncomfortable than afraid. Han Yunqing didn't speak, but stared silently at Long Fei Yi. Her eyes were clear and bright. It was rare for her to be so close to him for such a long time. The more she looked at him, the stranger she felt. His eyes were deep and cold, so deep that she couldn't see the bottom of them or his heart. The coldness that seeped into his bones was something he was born with, but this coldness was something he'd nurtured through the struggles of the imperial clan and the dangers of the Jianghu. Long Fei Yi, do you really want to kill me? As it turns out, our relationship over the past year has really been nothing more than an exchange of conditions. We can't even be considered friends. If Tang Li or Chu Shifeng saw this scene, they'd definitely be surprised. With Long Fei Ye's personality, how could he waste so much words? Besides Grand Concubine Yi, he'd kill anyone who knew of his origins without mercy. He should have stabbed him long ago. He even gave Han Yunqing a chance to speak. Seeing Han Yunqing fall silent, Long Fei Ye's eyes flashed with displeasure. Wasn't this damned woman always so eloquent? He'd like to see how much skill she had to convince him. How could she give up so easily? Was she tired of living? His sword suddenly drew closer until it was right in front of Han Yunqing. Answer your lordship's question, he demanded coldly. Han Yunqing woke up with a start. She didn't want to die. As a doctor, she'd hold on to even the slightest bit of hope when it came to saving lives. Now that it was time to save herself, she'd work hard to create hope even if there was none. In other words, power, status, face, glory, splendor, wealth, and rank would always be more important than Murong Wanru. Otherwise, Grand Concubine Yi wouldn't have swapped out the crown prince all those years ago. In the past, Grand Concubine Yi was even willing to part with her own daughter when she was favored by the late emperor. Much less now that he's gone, the imperial harem is someone else's world, Han Yunqing added. Long Fei Yi studied Han Yunqing with interest until Han Yunqing slowly shut her mouth. You understand Grand Concubine Yi very well, and you're very smart, Long Fei Yi evaluated objectively. Your Highness, you should understand Grand Concubine Yi very well and know that she's even smarter than me. Han Yunqing had to remind him that Grand Concubine Yi was a shrewd person. Under these circumstances, it wouldn't be easy for Long Fei Yi to force the mama's whereabouts out of her mouth. At these words, Long Fei Yi hesitated. Your Highness, Grand Concubine Yi and Qinxie both rely on Your Highness. It's just that Grand Concubine Yi needs Murong Wanru's comfort, that's all. If Your Highness trusts Qinxie, then keep pretending you don't know a thing and leave everything to Qinxie. Qinxie promises to give Your Highness a satisfactory explanation. Long Fei Yi was still studying Han Yunqing without replying. Han Yunqing grew anxious and hastened to add, Your Highness, for better or worse, you've called her Mufei for over 20 years. You should know in your heart how she treats you. Now Long Fei Yi broke into a cold laugh. Han Yunqing, you're a person who understands friendship and loyalty. Friendship and loyalty. All right, Han Yunqing couldn't afford to wear such a heavy hat, nor did she want to. She only knew that she didn't want to kill anyone. Her face was filled with emotion as she stared at Long Fei Yi with sincere eyes. It wasn't clear what Long Fei Yi was thinking, but seeing Han Yunqing's earnest gaze made his lips curve wider. Finally, he agreed. All right, your lordship will wait for your explanation. Han Yunqing rejoiced and rose to personally escort Long Fei Yi out the door. She was about to close the door when Long Fei Yi turned back to look at her. Han Yunqing, aren't you curious about your lordship's origins? Han Yunqing had always thought that even if this fellow didn't have the blood of Tianning's imperial clan, his origins wouldn't be small. Heaven knows where the old mama had found him for Grand Concubine Yi. Long Fei Ye's question confirmed Han Yunqing's suspicions, but at the same time revealed that he still had secrets on him. Han Yunqing gave a start and immediately expressed her stance. Qinxie doesn't want to know anything that shouldn't be known. The more she knew, the harder it would be for her to escape. The more she knew, the more danger she would be in. The more she knew, the faster she'd die. She wasn't that curious, so could he let her go this time? The carriage driver had gone the wrong way and the assassin had attacked. All of this had been premeditated. Grand Concubine Yi was very clear on Murong Wanru's schemes, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was that Han Yunqing had heard and seen things she shouldn't have. Grand Concubine Yi tossed aside the needles and asked sternly, "Where's my daughter?" A hateful person must have a pitiful side, and a pitiful person must have a hateful side. Han Yunqing didn't speak, but watched with cold eyes. She rose to stand to one side, but as soon as she left, Grand Concubine Yi saw Murong Wanru lying on the bed across from her. Murong Wanru was unconscious, as quiet as if she had fallen asleep. Grand Concubine Yi hastily rose to her feet. Han Yunqing didn't stop her, but allowed her to stagger away. "What's wrong with her? Han Yunqing, what did you do to her?" After the first wave of assassins retreated, another wave of real assassins came. She was hit by a poison needle. Before Han Yunqing could finish, Grand Concubine Yi cut her off. "Poison needle? You must have been the one who did it." All right, Han Yunqing was too lazy to explain, but admitted it openly. "Yes. Moreover, the time to treat the poison was delayed, so it'll never be cured." Grand Concubine Yi immediately narrowed her eyes and threw herself at Han Yunqing like a madwoman. "You venomous slut, you did it on purpose. You must have done it on purpose." Han Yunqing avoided her and said calmly, "Esteemed imperial concubine, His Highness Duke of Qin, still doesn't know about this." Grand Concubine Yi froze in place at these words. Aside from His Highness Duke of Qin, what else could calm her down? After His Highness brought people to rescue us, he went to chase after the assassins. Only, you, me, and Murong Wanru know about what happened in the carriage. Han Yunqing made up a lie. The other three families had all seen Long Fei Yi drive the carriage back after defeating the assassins. As for the truth, who would know? Grand Concubine Yi had to keep her cool even if she didn't want to. Han Yunqing, what do you mean by this? Just what do you want? Speak. What she feared the most wasn't Wanru finding out, but Fei. Fei was everything to the Duke of Qin's estate and her lifelong bet. Anyone could know, but not Fei. She wanted to be His Highness Duke of Qin's Mufei for the rest of her life. She was the most powerful imperial concubine in the history of the Tianning dynasty. Han Yunqing had been waiting for these exact words. Esteemed imperial concubine, I'll give you 2 conditions in exchange for 2 conditions. How about it? Would Grand Concubine Yi vomit to death if she knew the truth? In any case, she had no room to refuse now. Speak, she said through gritted teeth. First, although I can't treat the poison, I can give you some medicine every month to keep Murong Wanru alive. I can guarantee that she won't die and will be a quiet sleeping beauty. Second, from now on, I won't tell His Highness Duke of Qin about this. Han Yunqing spoke very simply, but both conditions were lies. Grand Concubine Yi hesitated. In truth, she couldn't refuse either of the conditions. Cold as she looked at Han Yunqing, she was both unwilling and helpless. In the end, she had to agree. Han Yunqing, what 2 conditions do you want from me? First, tell me why the mama who delivered the baby was still alive. Who and where she is, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't help but interrupt. So you heard everything. Actually, Han Yunqing wasn't sure whether the mama was still alive. She was only probing, and as expected, she found out. What, esteemed imperial concubine doesn't want to say? Grand Concubine Yi didn't reply, but asked cold, and the second condition? Han Yunqing wasn't in a rush for an answer, but smiled. The second condition is simple enough for Mufei. Mufei suffered a fright this time, so you can rest at ease in the ancestral hall. Leave the affairs of the Duke of Qin's estate to Qinxia in the future. If this wasn't power in the Duke of Qin's estate, then what was it? The true power lay in the Duke of Qin's hands, but he lived alone in the hibiscus courtyard and rarely took care of affairs. Grand Concubine Yi had always been in charge of personnel and finances. Although she couldn't control the Duke of Qin, she was still the mistress of the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqing wanted to take her place. How ambitious! As soon as she spoke, Grand Concubine Yi slapped the table and rose to her feet in rage. Han Yunqing, you're impudent. Han Yunqing really did want to wield power, but she didn't want the status or prestige of a mistress. She only wanted a free and unfettered life and a relaxed environment. Originally, she lived in a corner of the leisurely cloud pavilion with many inconveniences. Now that her relationship with Grand Concubine Yi had deteriorated to this point, how could she have good days ahead of her? All she wanted was a home where she could come and go as she pleased and speak freely. It's almost dark, so His Highness should be back soon. If Mufei can't accept it, then there's nothing left for us to talk about, Han Yunqing said as she prepared to leave. Stop right there. Grand Concubine Yi said sternly. Han Yunqing was happy to stop and turned back to look at her. Mufei, have you thought it over? Grand Concubine Yi couldn't take it anymore, but she had to. For Wanru and herself, she had no other choice. Once Han Yunqing told Fei, with his personality, her and Wanru's fate would only be, thinking up to here, she didn't dare to think any further. In a cold voice, she said, Han Yunqing, I promise you. But no matter what, I won't leave the Duke of Qin's estate. Mufei's courtyard has a Buddhist hall. It's a place of tranquility and cultivation. Why leave? Han Yunqing said simply. She'd be worried even if Grand Concubine Yi left. Wanru has to stay, too. Grand Concubine Yi demanded. Mufei, Wanru's a member of Marquis Pingbei's estate now. Of course she'll be sent back to be raised. Before Han Yunqing could finish, Grand Concubine Yi cut her off angrily. You can't. Wanru can stay, or else, but Han Yunqing ignored her and allowed her to interrupt. She calmly continued, Mufei, don't worry. Even if Wanru never wakes up, Marquis Pingbei's estate will take good care of her. I won't agree. Wanru has to stay by my side, or else I won't agree to anything. With Qinxie here, Mufei can set your heart at ease. Aside from that, there's no need to talk about anything else. One spoke in agitation, while the other was as calm as still water. Their voices fell at the same time, causing the room to fall silent. It wasn't clear whether Han Yunqing had heard Grand Concubine Yi's words, but she did hear Han Yunqing's last words. She gave a start and didn't express her opinion. After a long silence, Han Yunqing turned to look with a faint smile. Mufei, tell me what happened with the mama who delivered the baby. Grand Concubine Yi's fists clenched as her heart heaved. Han Yunqing waited patiently. In the end, Grand Concubine Yi compromised. She lowered her proud head and said, she's called Mama Su, one of the midwives. As soon as the baby was born, she slipped and fell into a well the next day. The emperor was pleased with the birth of a prince, so the news was suppressed and the corpse was disposed of. I only found out later. She was afraid that I'd silence her, so she faked her death and escaped. What's the background of this person? Where is she now? Han Yunqing asked anxiously. She never expected this person to be the one who'd brought Long Fei Yi here. She's from the Su family village in the northern suburbs of the city. I've searched for her for years, but there's still no news. Most likely, she has the guts to live on, but doesn't have the guts to bring this up. If not for Wanru's distrust, Grand Concubine Yi wouldn't have mentioned this person in the first place. A complicated look flitted past Han Yunqing's eyes. She could tell that Grand Concubine Yi wasn't lying. After some hesitation, she opened her mouth. Then His Highness's background. At the same time, Long Fei Yi was sitting on the roof, looking at Han Yunqing with interest. His lips quirked into a smile. Didn't this woman say she didn't want to know? She was brought from a village in the outskirts of the city. The villagers who knew about this have long been silenced. If Long Fei Ye's Mufei was a daughter of the Tang clan, how could he have been born in a village in the outskirts of the city? And how could he have been brought to the palace? Han Yunqing was filled with doubts. She thought that Grand Concubine Yi's knowledge was too far from the truth. At this moment, Grand Concubine Yi suddenly interrupted her train of thought. Han Yunqing, Fei is the late emperor's son. I won't allow you to ask such questions again. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.